our first webinar with Mrs. Rivera's crew. So
Welcome.
Agnes, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And your neighbors down the road in Miss Lozano's office are, are ready after a long day of teaching. And Mr. Cashman, representing Notre Dame up in Milwaukee.
Oh,
Good to see you.
you too, Kristen.
So today's webinar is going to be led by Kristen Melly, who is joining us, clearly. And I will be stepping out, but we have a few more who will be stepping in, but we'll be talking about Catholic identity today and at our next webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to pray in another minute or two, but it's hard to lead a prayer when people are still logging in. So I thought we would do a few announcements first. Hi, Alicia. Good to see you. Alicia's joining us from Baltimore, Archbishop Borders School, one of the original schools in the Twin Network. So a couple of announcements for folks. Later this week, you will receive a registration form. It's our first wave of learning about your school's intentions for the 2018 Summer Academy. We have more schools than space. So we're reaching out to our existing member school, and this includes St. Agnes as well, to learn of your intentions for the Summer Academy. And based on that, we'll then reach out to the second wave of schools who are hoping to join us, who are newer to the network than all of you on the call. So please note that, anticipate it, and that we will be needing a decision about your intentions for the Summer Academy by February 12th. The announcement registration will go out later this week, and then we need to hear from you by February 12th. Okay. Secondly, one of the other signature programs of the Roche Center is the Emmaus series. This is a leadership series for assistant principals, presidents, heads of school. In the past, we have had a number of twin principals participate. Michael Guerrera from St. Matthew, Bill Daly from St. Mary Magdalene, currently Patrick Landry from Notre Dame is in the Emmaus series. And this is a great opportunity for our school leaders to connect as school leaders and think and share and work through some of the particular responsibilities and to do that together in a companion cohort model. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can shoot me an email. We have a pretty good website about it too, emmausseries.org. Emmaus is spelled EMMAUS.org. The applications opened last week, and we'll be accepting applications through February 28th. Also, if you don't think it's a good fit for you, but you have colleagues in the diocese or around the country who you think, wow, I know this principal is really talented, it can really use some company and some support, send them the information. The cohort is going to be about 30 people. And the design of it is, again, an intense opportunity without a lot of time commitment for the principal. And then we work with members of your school team on particular areas of academic excellence, operational vitality, and spiritual leadership. So check it out. It's really a great program. And I'd love to see more twin principals take advantage. I don't know if there are any other announcements at this time. We have a brand new research director for research initiatives who started with us just yesterday. And we will try to make a point of having her join our next webinar on the 6th for you all to meet her. And Myra Reyes. I don't remember the second part of her last name.
Myra Rosen Reynoso. She is a Boston College graduate from the doctoral program at the Lynch School. She has worked on national initiatives as well as local initiatives through the University of Massachusetts, Boston. She is bilingual and has lived in different parts of the country, has worked with organizations and schools in different parts of the country. And we're just so lucky that she is literally down the road and excited to start new projects. So she's a mom, she's a researcher, She is a lot of fun, and I think we're all going to benefit from her knowledge. So we look forward to introducing you to Myra very soon.
Great. Thank you, Bridget. All right. So seems like we've kind of leveled out on the attendance. So I'm going to now initiate prayer. And I have a longer prayer scheduled for today, mostly because of our topic. Mary Bridget asked me to present on Catholic identity. And because we're Catholic and one of our signature activities is prayer, I thought I would lead us in something a little bit more reflective of our Catholic identity. So if you haven't had a chance today to kind of check in with God, now's your chance. I encourage you to just get comfortable, let your shoulders drop, release any tension in your jaw, in your hands, become comfortable. Recognize that throughout your entire day, God has been gazing upon you with a great love that we can't even imagine. And take comfort in that. Take joy in that. That is the promise of our baptism. As we read today's gospel, which is from the book of Mark, it's a longer gospel reading. I invite you to do something that's called Lectina Divina, which is using your imagination to enter into the story. As I read the gospel, I invite you to close your eyes and try to enter into the gospel story and pay attention to where you are in the story. Where are you in relationship to the people and the events of today's gospel? So let us begin. A reading from the Gospel of Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was taken by the lake. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be well and live." So he went with him. And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. And she had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed from her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the leader any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So, where were you in this Gospel reading? Were you outside of the crowd looking in? Were you in the crowd being kind of shuffled and pushed along? Were you looking at it from above, perhaps as if you had been up in a tree or on a rooftop? Were you sitting off from the distance, curious and hesitant, maybe not sure what to make of it? Or were you really up close to Jesus? Wherever you found yourself in today's reading, we are asked to move through our days with this persistent hope and belief. We see this in both the woman and the parents of the young girl, a persistent hope. They were both given circumstances that seemed irreversible, the woman's sickness and the girl's death. But with persistent hope, Jesus was able to reverse the situation. And so I think it is about our Catholic faith and the mission of our Catholic schools to operate with this persistent hope, despite the pressures of secularism and commercialism pressing in and trying to disrupt the mission of what we are about. We have to carry on in the midst of the crowd, perhaps, or on the edge looking in. But we have to carry on with this persistent hope. So let us pray. Good and generous God, we thank you for the time to meet together as colleagues, as educators and leaders of Catholic schools around the country. We thank you for the ways that you have been present to our work today, present to the families in our care, present to our teachers who work so closely with the children, supporting them, encouraging them on. We hear your invitation to live with persistent hope. Give us the grace to stay true to that call and embrace it with joy. We ask these things through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. So, Catholic identity, kind of a big topic. There's not one way to encapsulate it. But I do think that there is an evolution and cycles of Catholic identity that schools can go through. So as we talk and share today about things that are happening at our school, I want to invite you to think in a positive, critical way about maybe what is the maturity of the Catholic identity of your school. In what ways is the school's Catholic identity, weak or underdeveloped, and in what ways is it strong? So what I hope to do is provide a couple of different lenses for you to think about and attend to not all of them, but just one or two that seem to be a good fit for you and your team. Also want to hear from those of you on the call. What are some of the things that you're doing that you feel help strengthen the Catholic identity of your schools? And then we want to look at the very interesting event of both Ash Wednesday and Valentine's Day, I have some ideas to help keep that Catholic and full of persistent hope. So that's what I have planned for today. When we think of Catholic identity, depending on who you ask, you'll get lots of different answers. In 2012, John Convey, researcher at the Catholic University of America, produced a study gauging Catholic school educators' perspectives on Catholic identity. He came up with, through a series of interviews, a list of 12 identifiers of Catholic identity, and then surveyed over 3,000 educators to rank order the importance of these items. Well, this research was very important to help generate a conversation about the ways in which we perceive the Catholic quality, the Catholic character of our school. It has been my concern that we have perhaps lost part of the conversation, which is our understanding of these things. So we have schools that stand, they have crucifixes in their classrooms. Do children understand why those crucifixes are there? Students may take part in community service. Do they know why they're being asked to do community service? You may have icons hanging in your school, or maybe a picture of the Pope and your bishop. Do students understand why these indicators are there? If we assume our Catholic identity, if we assume Catholic understanding and not talk about it in very educated ways, we lose our Catholic understanding, and the symbols of our tradition become trappings, sort of just flat, unanimated signs of our faith. So when I talk about Catholic identity, when I think about Catholic identity, I think of it in this way. I use the word Catholicity because I like to think about there being a direct link to the teachings of our church, of our long, deep faith tradition. I don't know if I can, no, that won't let me do that. Okay, let me go back. If you look at, this is a projection. If you look at the thin white line on the right-hand side, that is what the projector is projecting. And that it would be sort of what I was referring to earlier about a trapping. If we just look at what is projected as our Catholic character of our schools, we miss everything that is producing that image. We miss the light, the direction, the knowledge, the sense of community. So when we think about Catholicity, we have to think about not only the signs of our faith that surround us, that are visible, that are the fingerprints of what we believe, but we have to make sure that we are connecting that with the teachings and the understandings. Further, we have to make sure that lots of people in the building know about these things, understand these things, have a curiosity about these things, because our kids need lots of adults in their lives to help them build these understandings. So if you have faculty members who are not active in their faith, we need to find ways to involve them, excite them, even if they're really in a bad place. They still need to be part of the conversation. So how do we do that? So again, when I think about Catholic identity, I want to talk about the experience of being Catholic and how we root these different symbols and signs into a deep understanding. So here are some things that come to my mind. First, as educators, I think we have to be more comfortable with what we do know and what we don't know. There are things that each of us have been handed to us in our own faith formation. There are parts of our big vast faith that are more clear to us than to others, and we have to be okay with that variance. I'd be able to talk about it with each other as faculty and as educational leaders, and also be able to identify the parts that are perhaps not so clear, kind of going beyond religious education certification programs. I'm talking about the intersection of a Catholic teaching and pedagogy, and how you might bring to life a lesson plan that is deeply rooted in something that we believe, something that might be sacramental. So I have found in my work with Catholic school educators, within a building, there's a great amount of variety about who feels better prepared to do this. Those who are stronger to do it tend to absorb all that responsibility. And again, I think that's a misstep. I think instead we need to create spaces that are accepting, hospitable, joy-filled, that allow us as adults to own what we don't understand and find ways to increase our own learning. And in some research that's sort of taking shape in my own doctoral work, it's clear that teachers helping teachers is one of the richest ways of addressing this need. Not so much principals helping teachers, but teachers helping teachers with these conversations. What does it mean to be a Catholic school teacher with these kids? So I invite you to have these conversations as a faculty and figure out ways to sort it. Another distinguishing characteristics, is prayer. And there are lots of ways to pray, although we tend to default to 3 or 4 particular prayers. And I would say that we're kind of not doing good modeling there, if that is the case. Children will respond more to prayer that has to do with what's going on in front of them in their own lives. So how can we practice as adult educators in Catholic schools the skills of praying for what's happening now for us? If someone on the line have a question, please feel free to jump in. Okay, well, if you have a question, that's a good reminder to me. Please feel free to jump in. So one of the things that I work with teachers to do is to think about this simple formula. So I would break faculty into different groups. And there's a group I say, okay, you come up with a whole bunch of names for you. So when you pray, how do you address God? What are all the different ways that we can address God? Creator, mother, gentle healer, on and on and on, right? So that group of teachers generates the you group. Who? The who group is, we're talking about the God who has done something, who led the Israelites out of Egypt, who revealed your love for us in the miraculous birth of a baby, who saves us through the resurrection. So the who is all of the different actions of our God in the history of our tradition. That's the who. So you can have a group of teachers with sticky notes who are generating all these who categories. Do. The do part is is our God doing for us now, right? Who does this, who opens our eyes, who converts our hearts, who makes us try harder and dig deeper. What are all the things that our God does for us? The to part is in order to do what? So what is it? Where are we trying to go? And have a group of teachers identify all those directional pieces. Where are we trying to go as a faith community? And through what? What are all the different graces that God gives us that allows God's presence to work through us? So you have 5 categories here. You have teachers working in 5 different groups, generating different ideas. And then at random, you have them pull their sticky notes together. So they're making collages, one from each group. And all of a sudden, you have a whole bunch of prayers that are just being generated. This is, once your faculty become comfortable with this recipe, you can do it with your students. And this teaches children that they have the words, right? They have a voice and they have their own words that they can bring to God, both on their own, but also as a class. And the opportunities here to think about this in multiple languages is also very rich. And you all work in that space, and I know you have ideas, but how can we introduce this recipe as part of our bilingual instruction? Any questions on this idea of sort of generating these organic prayers, first as a faculty to practice it, and then with students? And if anyone has any thoughts to add to this, I'd love to hear them. So I'm going to pause here and take a drink of coffee. Make sense? We good? Thumbs up? Awesome. Okay. So, memo the memoable. Okay? We do not need to spend more time reviewing faculty policies, student missteps, the schedule for the following week. Anything that can go into a memo, please put it in a memo. If you must write it down and post it somewhere, find a space to do that. But there's such an important amount of work that needs to happen when we are together as faculty that is about nurturing our spirituality. Even if you can carve out a third of the meeting toward the spiritual development as a community of educators, you're on the right path. So we have to recognize this is a first thing. And you may not be getting the support that you need from your diocese or from your pastor, but there are resources. There are ways that you can be doing this. Even following and listening together, there's Pray As You Go, which is a lovely 12-minute, it's an app that has a 12-minute prayer cycle. You listen to a musical selection, and then you hear the gospel or one of the readings for the day. The host of Pray As You Go will ask some reflective questions, and then the reading is reread. And then there is a closing prayer. It's like 12 minutes, and it's very rich. It's something that everybody can enter into. You don't have to be a theologian to really enjoy this. Again, it's called Pray As You Go. And even just creating a practice of this and inviting your staff to share afterward can go a long way. We have to develop this. We have to make time to develop this. If we want all of the symbols of our Catholic faith to mean something, then we need to invest in our own spirituality as educators. Any of you doing something now that allows for faculty to connect spiritually just as faculty or faculty with administration? I'd love to hear it. Okay. So maybe it's a novel idea. Maybe you thought of it, but you haven't made it a priority. I really encourage you to, because this is a real vulnerable area of our schools. And the opportunity for change is in the faculty. So I'm seeing some chat. How do I, hang on a second. Sorry, I have a bunch of people chatting with me. Okay, we're good. I'm going back to the sharing. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so next. As we know, parents are the primary educators of their children. I don't know if any of you follow Catholic School Matters, Tim Ewell. Yes, maybe. Tim Ewell is a superintendent in Montana. That giant state has but one diocese, and he's the superintendent. And I think to keep himself busy, he maintains a blog and a podcast. And just last week, Father Ronnie O'Dwyer, a Jesuit with whom the Roach Center works a great deal, and I wrote an open letter to parents of the young church. I encourage you to take a look at it. Perhaps something that you can use on your website or put it in front of your prospective families. We outline a number of points why Catholic schools are really important for today's young families, to try to encourage parents who haven't invested in Catholic education to really think about it in new ways. Our families, many of them, most of them, are living on the edge of the operation of school. Matt, you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to ask
Yes, please.
where we could access that letter.
Okay, I will, if Mary is still on, I'm not sure she is, I will.
I'm getting to that later, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. So if you go to Catholic School Matters, it's the blog from January 24th. That's when it was posted. And it's called Open Letter to Parents of Young Children. And it's under his blog. So if you go to Catholic School Matters, and there's like a newsletter, and there's a blog, and then there's a podcast. If you go to the blog, you'll find it there. Yeah, but I'll have Fabiola send it out to all of you as well. For all kinds of reasons that most of us understand, because we have busy families. Families are living on the edge of the community. Some of them are volunteering and they're really active, but most of them are on the edge. So I encourage you to pay attention to the edge of the community. How can you as educators, teachers, and administrators enter a little bit into their space in constructive ways to invite something like a spontaneous prayer in the parking lot? This is just one way to capture and create a moment of faith for very busy people. I think we have to recognize that there will be events and times where families must come into the school. They must step into the center of their children's education. But in a lot of cases, that's not easy. And so how can we meet families? Can you have your morning prayer across the school also do through this format that we're using? We use Zoom. It costs nothing. But if you had a link on your website that parents could just click in, and from their offices or from their kitchens, whatever they're doing, participate in your school day, in what you're doing for your kids, helps parents be a part of the conversation. As parents have become really stretched, it's harder for them to take the time to have the conversations with children that form them, that shape them, that structure their value systems, the things that you're doing intentionally at school. So thinking of extending yourselves to the edges where families are only helps parents fulfill their job more, and to share in the culture and the languages of your school. So I just want to invite you to think a little bit more creatively about where and how, about the where and how you're inviting families to. Like, what are those spaces? Can you create new spaces? Anyone doing anything along these lines? I'll give you an example. So, because I'm a busy parent too, my son had to do a book report with a classmate, and so he put using Google Slides and put something together. But the teacher also assigned, as part of the book report, he had to interview someone in the house. So it was his job to present the book report as almost a dress rehearsal with someone. It was me. And then I had to answer some questions, and he had to videotape that and put it into the book report. So I was looking really fresh at 10:30 at night. It was excellent. But just an idea of, here's the invitation, a child sharing their schoolwork and asking their parent or older sibling what they learned, and then including that into the final project. I thought was a very cool way to think about how home life can be part of the child's in-school project and presentation. So you're all very creative people. I know you'll come up with stuff, but that's just one idea. I'd love to hear more. Please don't be shy. things that your teachers are doing? I hear somebody. Okay. Yeah, so I know many of you use things like Padlet or some sort of online gallery space to showcase student work, and that's great. How can it become even more dynamic? How can it become more participatory for the parent? That's the invitation to us all. Something else to think about. Most adults and students recognize that community service is valuable. But a lot of times we don't often know how to explain why it's valuable. Another example, my son, because it's Catholic Schools Week, his class went and did a community service project today. And I said, well, why are you doing that? I don't know. They said they needed our help. Like, but why? Why not ask the local public school? Why is it that we as Catholic schools care about this? So here I'm asking you to think about something that you just may take for granted as a community, and recognize that it's a very teachable moment, and that by participating in the Eucharist, by being baptized people, the fulfillment of that sacrament happens when we are living with and for others. So we receive these sacraments in order to be the hands and the feet of Jesus in the world. And that's not often something that people are connecting. And I want to encourage you to think about that as a staff. And perhaps you can engage some local seminarians or your pastor, other people to come and help your faculty unpack this idea a bit more. But it's not enough to just send people out. They have to recognize they're being sent out because we are called to do this. So another way to sort of deepen that projection, right? It's not just that, oh, there's, probably 50,000 Catholic school students out in the world today because it's Catholic Schools Week and they're doing good things. They're helping veterans. They're making cards. They're visiting with the sick. But do they recognize that they're doing this because they're called to do it? That there's a special implication for them, that they belong to something so much bigger than just their own classroom. So many different ways that we can deepen our understanding of social justice and service, Eucharist and other sacraments by making these connections a lot clearer. So any thoughts or examples that folks want to share?
I can share one, sure.
Say it again?
I can share one, sure.
Please. I'm so tired of listening to myself.
Yeah, I know, sorry. It's kind of one of those, it's late in the day and everybody's tired. And
oh, yeah.
Asked a few times and none of us have said anything. So
it's a lot of sympathy.
We recently did like Hunger Task Force food drive here where our kids brought in different canned goods and other things like that. I mean, I know a lot of schools do that, but we actually found out the other day that we, of all the schools that participated, we had donated the most pounds of food. So we were, awarded something for that, which was not why we did it. But we try to do things like that. So that was a recent example of something that we did that the kids got excited about, just the idea of doing something that would help other people around them. So.
Nice. That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
I can share as well.
Great, thanks.
I think we participate in several service projects throughout the school year. We do similar to that. a food drive where we collect different goods, and then the kids go out and distribute to different needy families in the community. And I think the piece that we're trying to integrate more and more is having them reflect upon returning. So talking about that experience of actually not just the collection, but going out and delivering the goods and meeting the families, so they get to see firsthand the impact that their service has on the lives of others, and then coming back and sharing. I think that piece, which we need to continue to build on, is really making a huge impact in their lives.
That's great. Both excellent examples. And you can, before you send your students out, to do that, just to reflect together on the miracle of fishes and loaves, and explain to the children that this is how this is done today, that you are part of that living miracle, because here's a food pantry, or here's an empty truck that's about to travel to a very needy region of the country, and we are pulling our resources together to feed the thousands instead of just a few. Alicia?
Something I've been thinking a lot about. So we're doing a lot of work now trying to rebuild our early childhood program and make it a lot more, focused on social emotional and giving choice. And so I'm confident that those kids who come up through that, once we get that kind of more established, will have like a greater sense of agency, like kind of self-agency in the world and understanding. But I'm trying to think about how we can have the service projects much more student driven. So having them come up with whatever creativity or whatever gift they have, whether it's like playing the guitar at the harbor one afternoon. I mean, who knows what we could do? And we haven't done this yet this year, but it's really something I want to do, is have them develop the whole concept from start to finish, instead of doing the more traditional kind of drive, which we do already.
Yeah, that's great. And something that might help to bring some like shape to that, to pick one or two organizations that are convenient to your school, and find ways for the students to recognize their gifts for these particular organizations. That way you're not spreading efforts in lots and lots of different directions, but again, focusing your energies on helping just a couple of organizations. The other advantage to doing that is you can, as the program evolves, children could end up having, a 4, 5, 6 year relationship of service to this one organization. And as they grow in their learning and in their faith, they can see long-term how important it is to participate in the world this way. Often we do these, quick one-off things, again, very important, but what's missing for the child is this extended conversation and understanding of these problems and the systemic dimension to the challenges of hunger and homelessness and all the other things that our schools work to make an impact. So again, I encourage you, less is more. Fewer organizations can be better. And then to help your students over their years in your school to recognize the different levels of impact that they can make. But that's a great idea. Do you have a student council, like a student council group? Because they might do, some schools have a student council group that kind of helps to develop or organize some of these projects. And then you're really being true to that idea of student-led, it's really easy. One quick story. There was a Catholic school that I was working with, and here in New England, and their students were supposed to do a big Valentine's Day chocolate sale, and it snowed very badly 2 days before Valentine's Day, and the kids hadn't done the preparation that they should have been. And so the teachers went in and they saved the fundraiser. Yeah, the kids didn't learn. So yes, do the fundraiser, but the bigger, deeper learning that we're going for these kids is that they have the responsibility, and they experience when things don't work out, and they're given the chance to process that, as some of you have said earlier, the importance of processing what their actions were. So learning happens from our failures big time. So don't, let's be models of that for our students. Another dimension that is really important to Catholic education, Catholic identity, is the idea of encounter. We are in the world, students of the world, to learn about ourselves, and that learning of ourselves happens when we enter into other people's stories, when we allow ourselves to sit with and learn from one another. And I think this is something that our schools do really well at. I just don't want us to overlook it or take it for granted. We have to make sure that we're allowing time for students to encounter each other's story. Many schools have these buddy days, where your older grade kids sit and engage with your younger grade kids. I think that's awesome. Keep that going. Make time for it. These are the things that, can really stay with a young person. And we want to recognize, that learning happens, learning of ourselves, learning of who we are happens when we connect with others. So a very important dimension of our own faith growth. And then the last part of my presentation today is this, unique occurrence of Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday happening on the same day. Yay. How do you do it? And so one idea that I wanted to suggest is that you focus on relationships. Relationships allows us to talk about all kinds of good stuff. And again, these are things that you can do. These are conversations that you can have at all grade levels. Relationships are a key part of our human experience. They can help teach us who we are. Meeting new people can open new worlds for us, something that Annis Nin wrote about famously. And they can help us identify, what's important. If we don't have other people in our lives, we don't always recognize truly what we value. Sometimes with older children, when you read books and one of the characters dies, or there's an ending in that person's life, the other characters in the book reflect on, what's now missing, what's been lost. And it's a great way for us to teach about the value each one of us brings to each other's lives. So in the context of, kindergarten and first grade, how can we encourage young people to appreciate each other? Because we're Catholic, because it's Valentine's Day, and because the season of Lent happens to deepen our relationship with God. Lent is the time where we recognize the things that we want to learn about who we are, who we want to become, and to prioritize what's valuable. So not only do we celebrate St. Valentine's Day and the loving, kind, friendly relationships in our lives, but as a season of Lent, it's an opportunity to recognize the love that we have received. Different kinds of relationships, very simply, the relationships that are just given, right? We are in relationship with parents and grandparents and siblings. These are just given relationships. We're in relationship with God. And then there are relationships that we have to earn, relationships that go through different cycles of giving and taking. But how do we earn a deeper relationship with Jesus? What does that look like? How do we earn a deeper or the healing in a relationship with someone where the relationship's been fractured? What are those steps? And so I know many of you work with kids on this level. Friendships can change very quickly in the younger grades and less quickly in middle school. But talking about how we earn relationships is very, very important. And you can also think about it in the context of our tradition. You can look at just the paradigm of God in the first 5 books of the Bible. We have a God who first does stuff for us and then says, so be in relationship with me. He's the God of covenant, right? I will do these things for you. You can depend on this. You can rely on this. I just need you to honor that. I need you to if you're going to be here, then be here, right? If you're going to believe, then believe. So we've got lots of examples from our tradition about that. How do we care for relationships? How do we show that we give time? How do we demonstrate that we are aware of ourselves in the relationship? Are we taking advantage of a relationship? And then how can we hold a position of acceptance for where others are at? And putting these questions in our faith context, how are we giving time for God in our lives, right? If God is there constantly for us, if Jesus is, again, standing at our side waiting for us to acknowledge his presence, how do we give time for that? How do we demonstrate as faithful people that we are aware of God's presence? What should that look like for 3rd graders, right? How can we encourage young people to recognize God is in relationship with them? Then how can we accept ourselves and our faults and our baggage and our sense of brokenness, and to be able to receive the love in a relationship? So these are themes that, we can incorporate in Valentine's Day, and they are the deeper themes of Lent as we prepare for the season of Easter, as we prepare for the miracle of resurrection in our lives. We can be thinking about how we are attending to the relationships and what those relationships mean to us. So that might be one way to go. Any thoughts or questions on the relationships angle? No? Okay. I wanted to remind folks, I don't know if you know this, but in the Twin webinar archive, almost a year ago, I did a 1-hour webinar on very particular classroom activities that you could do with children, involving rainbows and seeds and plants and circles of awareness. So there's a lot of good stuff there that if you didn't catch this webinar last year, I encourage you to go check it out. The first third of the webinar is just a lot of announcements that won't be relevant to you, but the second 2/3 will be. So if you're looking to sort of explore bilingual education and Lent in the classroom, that's one way you can go. But overall, I hope that this has given you some ideas about not only expressing a Catholic identity, but learning to think and talk about the formation of that identity across your school community. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or thoughts.
Kristen, just a couple of questions from the beginning. I got a little distracted with another message when you were talking about a couple things at the beginning.
Okay.
You said February 12th is the deadline for registration for the Twin Summer Academy.
Correct. So in the next day or two, definitely by Friday, you will receive an email from us inviting you to complete a registration form. We do not expect you to have your team completely sorted, but we do need to know what your plans are, what your commitments are for the academy, so that we can.
We're going to send, or
say it again.
We need to know how many people we're going to send.
Well, we know that we can accommodate your team of 5, and then we'll do a wait list for teams more than that. Your mentors are separate. We will work on their reservations separately. This is only to understand what your school's interested in doing. Okay. We have, like I said, we have potentially more schools and teams of 5 than space. But I don't think that some of our new schools, I don't think are quite ready for the academy. So I am hopeful that some schools can bring 6 or 7 folks. But we're trying to expedite a process so we do know that, so we can let people know if there is space for additional team members. But you can certainly count on a team of 5, 1 being the school leader, and the other 4 can be grade level teachers. It can be a critical board member. It can be one of your strategic planners. It can be your pastor. So we really encourage schools to think about the learning that is needed to bring the program to the next level and who needs to be there.
And then you also mentioned the Emmaus series, but I didn't catch what you were saying about that. Is there a deadline coming up?
So yes, we've just opened the application process for the next cohort. So the Emmaus Leadership Series is a cohort program. It's a 20-month program. It lasts a long time because we're trying to make an impression on your thoughts and actions as a school leader, but it's not a great deal of time at once, sort of how I would say it. So it consists of 2 overnight retreats here in Boston, one this summer, July 17, 18, 19, and then May, the first week of May in 2019. In between that, there are 4 day-long workshops with a 1-hour follow-up webinar, kind of like this. And in the second year, another 4 workshops with a follow-up webinar. The cost for that is $2,000. It actually is $4,000 for us to run, but we only charge $2,000. $2,000 covers both overnight retreats, accommodations, meals, materials, as well as members of your school team, 3 to 5 of them, to come to the day-long workshops, of which there are 8. And if you can manage the travel, we'll put you up. So we can do accommodations for all of these workshops. Travel is on the individual schools. Title II dollars can be used. We will work with your LEA to do what we need to do to make that happen. And then if you're still stuck, we can talk about scholarships. But we've always told schools that the money should not be a barrier. Just be in conversation with us and where you're at.
And what's the deadline for applying?
The 28th of February. And we also, I should say, just received approval to have a second strand or pathway through the Emmaus series that involves graduate credits. So you can do the program as it is for the $2,000, or you can do the program for 6 graduate credits. And that involves meeting once a week for the 12-week semesters that we have here at Boston College for 75 minutes online. There's a few brief readings and the opportunity to take the learning of the semester and create a problem of practice project that you would develop over the 12 weeks of the semester. So that is, the cost for that is being sorted. We're trying to have the cost be only 50% of the program, in Boston College with funding would cover the other 50%. So we're hoping to get a decision on that in the next few weeks. You do not need to decide on that enrollment until the summer though. So, we're just looking to see who's interested, and we're still working on securing a good amount of funding to help make that under a reality for folks. Yeah, no problem. Those 6 credits, by the way, would end up being part of a 10-credit Catholic school leadership certificate that's being developed. It's about finished. But those graduate credits can also be applied to any sort of master's or doctorate degree that you might be pursuing. So hopefully that helps. Good. What else? I'm going to zoom out of my shared screen here. Can you still see me, I hope?
Yes.
Okay. I'm supposed to post in the chat window the evaluation of our conversation today. Please give us some feedback. I'd love to know what was helpful, what was not, what you would like to get more of. That would be great. Anything else that I can assist you? You have my attention. So anything that I can help you with while we're still here? Oh, hey, Liz. Have you been here all along? I just switched views, and I'm now seeing people that I didn't know was on. So great to see you. All right. So I just put in the chat window. Do you all know where the chat window is? If you go down to the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see where it says chat. It's the last link in there. And I will post the open letter to parents of young children in there as well. But it's great to see you all. I hope this was a helpful conversation. It's something that I'm always thinking about, and these experiences with you help me with my thinking. So please give me some good feedback. Yes. Any other questions? All right. Well, blessings, everybody. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for your participation in the network. Your time here today makes us all stronger. So blessings, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.